do that. Hold on, that is seeming like it's not cooperating. So let me just say, okay, we'll close you down. We'll go at it a different way.
Okay, let me fix
Let me
my-
try one more time here. There we go. Let me do. There we go. Unit. So here's what I make. Can you see my screen?
Mhm.
In fact, I'll just do it on the fly. And what I'm saying here is that this says registration of securities and their issuers. And really what this is about is registration of securities and the issuer. So where you're at, Michelle, unit 8, 9, and 10 is about how do we register securities? If not, why not? How do we register broker dealers? If not, why not? How do we register agents of a broker dealer? If not, why not? How do we register investment advisors? If not, why not? How do we register investment advisor representatives? If not, why not? That's 8, 9, and 10. Now, of those registration questions, you're going to get much more of them on registration of investment advisory firms and investment advisory representatives than you are on registration of securities and registration of broker dealers, but it's there. That's 3, 4 questions, right? So, well, what are securities and who issues them? So if you're an issuer of securities and you're not going to register the security, it's either going to be because the security is exempt or the transaction is exempt. I think, Michelle, of exempt securities as being a laundry list. And I think of exempt transaction of how I'm selling it. I am no longer a employee of Kaplan. I think of myself as a senior instructor emeritus kind of guy. And, they hire my LLC to teach classes for them. But back in the day, when I would have some junior instructor and I'd be training him and take him on the road with me, he or she, they said, well, Dean, I thought, Kaplan instructors have to have a blazer and a tie when they're teaching classes. I said, that is true. And they said, how come you don't do that? I said, well, I'm exempt. That rule does not apply to me.
Yeah.
They said, well, what about me? I said, well, it certainly applies to you. And they, well, gee, I said, now there are certain classes where you maybe don't have to wear a tie, but that it depends on the circumstances. Me, I'm never going to have to do it because I'm exempt. So, we're going to talk about exempt issuers, exempt transactions. Now, one of the challenges on your exam is that you're being tested on a template, not the actual rules of your state. This template you're being tested on, Michelle, was written in the 1950s. Oh my God. And the way that people talked in the 1950s and today, even the way attorneys still talk, is really kind of like a foreign language. Like for you and I, we would probably call it an airline company or a railroad company or a trucking company. But, in the 50s, we called them common contract carriers. Oh, and attorneys love, legalese. They love a little Latin, bona fide, good faith. So that's where it. Now, good news for us, as much as I'm kind of bitching here a little bit, it's a good thing we have this template because the North American Securities Administrators Association has said that if you pass this test, you're good to go in their state. Now, before we had this template, that means you'd have to every state you want to sell a security in, you'd have to go take their particular version of that test. Insurance is much still like that today, as well as like passing the bar. You get past the bar in every state you want to practice. The whole point here is protecting investors. And so that's always what you want to have in mind when you're doing questions. That this is all about protecting, and I would say retail investors, Joe Sixpacks. It's not about protecting institutional investors who are capable of protecting their own assets. It's about protecting Joe Sixpacks, retail investors. Okay, so persons, again, half the test is legal. and half the test is investments. And persons just means somebody who can be held legally accountable for their behavior under law. And we have two versions of persons. You know, Mitt Romney took some heat when he was running for president because he said corporations are people too. And, a lot of my progressive friends just, went ballistic. What he was trying to say is that corporations are unnatural persons. They're not living, breathing human beings walking planet Earth, but they can be held accountable for their behavior and they have rights and privileges just like any other person. Natural persons are living, breathing human beings. So, for example, when we get to agents or broker dealers, that has to be a natural person. To be an investment advisor representative, you have to be a natural.
Okay. Sorry.
No worries. And the firm is not. So as you can see here, we have buildings and we have people. So securities is pretty much anything you would think it would be. Common stock, bonds. What we really test you is on not so much what are persons and not so much what are securities, but what is not a person, what is not a security. A broker dealer is a person. And again, what that means is they can be held accountable for their behavior. It's an unnatural person. That means it's a subchapter S. It's an LLC. It's a C Corp. That's your broker dealer. And then here's you. You're an agent of that broker dealer, right? That's your 6. That's your 7. That's what makes you an agent of the broker dealer. And now we have an affiliated investment advisory firm. Now, what I mean by affiliate is because that means you're taking a 66 means you are going to be representing both the broker dealer with your Series 7, and you're going to be representing the investment advisory firm as an investment advisor rep, right? So there's your 7, there's your 66, and there it is all together, right? Boom.
Together, yeah.
There you go, right? So, a 66, by the way, doesn't work without a 7. So, it's to be assumed that when you're taking a 66, you're also going to be the agent of the broker dealer. By the way, that's important to disclose that relationship, right? So, sometimes, it depends how far overboard your disclosure. You can't possibly go too far overboard. But I had a guy, Gary, he was contemplating making a $300,000 investment with me. He said, "Well, Dean, what do you think? Should I invest?" I said, "Well, before I answer that, Gary, you need to understand something. I'm an agent of the broker dealer. It's unlikely that I'm going to tell you that you should not invest in this. I think it's still, you should invest, but you need to understand if you need a third party, go get your attorney or your accountant because it's unlikely." The answer is, yeah, I think you should put 300 grand in this thing, but I'm not your fiduciary. Whereas in investment advisory firms, we're acting as a fiduciary. Right, there we go. There's all those folks. So let's talk about the securities. This is unit 8 and how we're going to either register it or not, right? So what is a security? Right now, I think it's kind of interesting because you're taking your test in a very opportune time because the SEC is going after a lot of crypto people saying you are selling unregistered securities. And, state administrators have, filed friends with the court briefs with the SEC saying we too think that a lot of these cryptocurrencies are unregistered securities. Now, they've agreed that Bitcoin is not an unregistered security. It's a medium of exchange and Ethereum, but, so efforts of a third party, this is the definition the SEC and state administrators are using when they're trying to get people in trouble for selling unregistered securities. You're offering an investment opportunity with the efforts of third-party management. There's money, it's a common enterprise, and profit is anticipated. That is a security. So would that be a common stock, a corporate bond, an ADR, whatever the case may be? Now on the test, insurance products are what we call non-securities products. Non-securities products. Now, that's important because that means they have a different regulatory framework. What I mean by that is it's not the state administrator who protects me from insurance agents. It's the State Department of Insurance. So we're not saying you can rip people off with insurance. We're just saying that if you do, there's somebody else who has authority and jurisdiction. Again, it's a legal test, right? That's why there's always a sign that tells you you're leaving state A and you're entering state B. because the regulatory framework could change dramatically. Dramatically. Retirement plans and IRAs and 401ks are not securities. Now, but the big point here is when we're saying it's not a security, that means we don't have to register it. Where we're not going to have to qualify, we're not going to have to coordinate. That's what we're saying. So this is a wrapper, not a security. Now, the other idea here is if I can convince you something is a security, it's not. The potential for fraud is large. My aunt thinks that her retirement plan is a diversified portfolio of Elvis plates from the Bradford Exchange. And, I keep telling my aunt it's not a security. In fact, every time she gets one, there's like a 2-page disclosure to her that she's not buying an investment opportunity. She's not buying a security, but rather what she's buying is a collectible. Commodities are not securities. Now, commodity futures are kind of interesting because they are, but not under the template you're being tested on. It's not commodity futures are not securities. They're just not securities on the Uniform Securities Act. They're regulated by what's called the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. So what we call this is, again, the state administrator has no jurisdiction, no authority over commodities futures. The reason there's an asterisk next to condominium is because the question here is, how are we selling it? If we are selling fractional ownership in real estate, that's what condominiums are, as an investment opportunity, not a personal residence, that's the key distinction. The state administrator may say, you know what, I think that's a security, needs to be registered. Currencies aren't securities. These Iraqi dinars are not securities. They are a medium of exchange. But again, if I can convince you that currencies are a security, well, then the potential for fraud is quite large. Every time, Michelle, I see the sting on television, I watch it every time. I've probably seen it 30 times. And all I can't help but think is, geez, securities fraud is so much easier. I mean, because all we need to defraud somebody in securities is pieces of paper. I mean, the idea that I got to go rent a place and build a fake horse track betting parlor and hire actors, I'm like, that's a lot of work. Securities fraud has much better margin. Much better margin. It has one of the highest rates of recidivism as well. It's hard for people to go straight. Okay, so the issuer. Again, person means somebody who can be held legally accountable. So if you issue or even propose to issue a security, you're an issuer. It's up to the jurisdiction. I can always tell these private companies have pretty good legal counsel because I'll see one of the CEOs and they'll be asking about selling securities to the public. And they say, we've never discussed it. It's not on the radar screen. We'll cross that bridge perhaps someday. Whereas if you say, yeah, we hope to go public in the next 24 months, you could become subject to all the regulatory framework we're discussing right now. So if you just propose to issue the security, you're an issuer. This is important. So in issuer transactions, the proceeds are going to the issuer. We call these primary transactions. Primary transactions. All those transactions together are called the primary market. And the state administrator is much more concerned with primary transactions than they are with secondary transactions. I kind of think of it like a car, right? When you buy a car, you have a choice whether you want to buy a new car or a used car. Do you want to buy a car on the primary market or do you want to buy a car on the secondary market? Now, if you buy a car in the primary market brand new, you have as a consumer higher expectations. You think it comes with a warranty, there's more, expectations you have from the car dealer. If you buy used, remember it's called caveat emptor. Let the buyer beware. When you think about it, ours is the only industry I know where by legislation 33, Uniform Securities Act, by legislation, it's let the seller beware. We, the seller of the security, have to make sure we're doing it correctly. Wow, I don't know of any other industry that's the case. So it's up to us to make sure that we are doing this correctly. Proceeds goes to the investor, that's secondary market. And the point here is the state administrator is not as concerned in the secondary market. Now, I did not say that you can rip off people in the secondary market. I just said that, the expectations, the regulatory framework is less. And that just means, again, if you're participating in that market, you should be a little more, wary, right? If you're buying a used car, for example, as compared to buying the new car, right? So again, that's what we're saying here. So primary market is where we want to spend most of our focus as a test taker. Now, prior to 1933, I would say, trust me, you'll love it. President Roosevelt, all that legislation was called the New Deal. That means the old deal must have sucked. The old deal was, trust me, you'll love it. President Roosevelt, when he changed our business, said, you guys will thank me later. I know right now you're a little upset with me, that you're going to have to do all this stuff, but it'll promote public confidence. And 33 says, if you're going to sell brand new securities to the public, you have to have a registration statement, hence the term, very important, registered securities. The Uniform Securities Act says the same damn thing. I'm a state administrator, so here in Nevada, I have two levels of protection as a retail investor. As a retail investor on the federal level, the SEC protects me. On the state level, the state administrator protects me. Both of them say, if you're going to sell brand new securities to the public, those securities need to be registered. If you are selling unregistered securities, you better have some kind of a reason. We call these in legalese safe harbor. Safe harbor is just a legal term for asking an attorney, how can I still do what I want to do? I love my brother, but he smokes pot. I don't smoke pot. I smoke, cigars and, Anyways, he's got his pot plants there. And I said, well, Chris, what are the safe harbors for, growing pot plants in Arizona? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, I don't think you're just allowed to turn your 10 acres into a pot farm. He goes, oh, I get what you're asking. I said, what I'm asking you, is there a de minimis? What the hell's that? I go, well, that's Latin for, who's small, so small, who cares? He said, well, yeah. He said, 3 plants is the safe harbor of personal use. I said, well, do me a favor. As a brother who loves you, don't go for that 4th plant. I know how your mind thinks. You sneak another 4th one in there, and then you become a pot dealer, right? So it's important to know what those safe harbors are. So we're going to talk about what securities don't need to be registered because they're exempt, the issuer. If the issuer is exempt, the only kind of security they can give birth to is an exempt security. And then we're going to talk about if it's not, then it's going to be an exempt transaction. And then if not, then we're going to say how we're going to register it, right? So it's kind of a flow chart of where we're heading. All right, so here we go. Please note, exempt securities under the Uniform Securities Act. So, Michelle, would I like you to know everything? The answer is yes. But if you don't have enough brain space to know everything, what I mean by that is the federal and the state. For a test taker, the state rules are much more important. Right, so I would like you to know everything. So I'm not talking here about exempt securities under 33. I'm going to. I know you're excited. Here I'm talking about exempt securities on the Uniform Securities Act. What this means is I do not have to register these securities with the state administrator. These I can sell unregistered. So commercial paper does not need to be registered with the state administrator. It kind of makes sense because, again, commercial paper, short-term borrowing by corporations isn't sold to Joe Sixpacks. Commercial paper is sold to money market fund managers who are capable of protecting their own interests. So that kind of makes sense that doesn't need to be registered. Very big time ones on both. 33, Uniform Securities, but we're talking about Uniform Securities Act right now. The U.S. government is an exempt issuer, and municipalities are an exempt issuer. So SEC or state administrator said, Dean, did you sell this unregistered security to a retail investor? I say he did, but it was a treasury bond. Neener. Don't suggest you say that part. Or they say, Dean, did you sell a unregistered security to a resident of my state? I say, I did, but it was a municipal bond. neener. Those are securities that need not be registered under the Uniform Securities Act or 33. It's not that banks get a free pass. It's that banks have a different regulator, kind of like the insurance, right? This is called either the state, it'll be the banking commission. On the federal level, it's going to be the Federal Reserve Board. So it's not that banks, when selling their own securities, one of my favorite banks, Michelle, is called Beal Bank, Beal, Beal Bank, and Andy Beal owns 100% of that bank. Wow. And if Andy wanted to sell common stock in Beal Bank, he wouldn't be answering to the state administrator or to the SEC. He would be answering to either the state, if it's a state banking charter he has, and he wants to sell securities, or to the Federal Reserve Board if he has a national banking charter. So it's not that financial institutions get a free pass. It's again that they have a different regulator. Same thing for insurance companies. Insurance companies, we're not talking about an insurance company selling variable annuities. We're talking like there was a company called Esurance based in California that sold themselves to Allstate. But before they sold themselves to Allstate, they were thinking about going public. And again, we're not saying that Esurance doesn't have a regulator. We're saying it would be the Department of Insurance of California. So it's not the state administrator, it's some other person is the point. Well, public utility companies and common contract carriers, again, don't answer the state administrator. They answer to the Public Utilities Commission, or if it's a common contract carrier, trucking company, airline, something like that. When we passed this in the mid-50s, they answered to what's called the Interstate Commerce Commission. So again, it's not that they don't have a regulatory framework, it's just it's a different regulatory framework. This one is scary, but true. I say, ladies and gentlemen, what are you getting in your investments? As the imam at the mosque, or bishop at the temple, or pastor at the church, rabbi at the synagogue. I say, hey, today I'm offering you church debentures. They pay 50 basis points, 50 bips over the junk bond index. We can do the Lord's work. We can get a higher return. Scary but true, that security does not need to be registered under either 33 or what we're discussing now, the Uniform Securities Act. Now, I do like this, Michelle. This is a trick question. No one and nothing's exempt from anti-fraud. And they arrested this pastor who was selling investments to his flock. And when they arrested him, he said, hey, I'm an exempt issuer. And we said, well, you're a little confused about what that means. That doesn't mean you can rip people off. It just means you don't have to register the security. So no one and nothing is exempt from anti-fraud provisions. So, to say you don't have to register the security is not to say that you can then use it to rip people off. Right? It's saying you just don't have to go through that. Now, Congress passed a thing called the National Securities Market Improvement Act. And what the National Securities Market Improvement Act was create two buckets of what we call federally covered securities, which we're about to discuss, and federally covered investment advisors. State administrators did not like the National Securities Market Improvement Act because it took power away from them. And what this basically says, National Securities Market Improvement Act, is that if you're a federally covered investment advisor or federally covered security, you don't need to register with the state as an investment advisor or the security. Woohoo! So what are federally covered securities? Very testable, need not be registered. Those are listed securities that trade on NASDAQ or New York. So, the state administrator can't require a listed security on NASDAQ to be registered. The big one for us on the test is mutual funds. So, if I'm the Franklin Funds and I want to roll out a Wisconsin tax-free fund for residents of Wisconsin, I don't have to register that with the state of Wisconsin. Be careful. I do have to register, with the SEC, but not with the state. We're talking about the Uniform Securities Act right now. For the first part of this, you got to stuff it all in your brain housing group, and then you got to work on delineating it, right? So you got to get it all up here and then work on it. Now, be careful in this one. I told you the state administrators did not like this because it took power away from them. And so we said, well, as a common courtesy, the mutual fund would make a notice filing. Be careful. Don't tell me that's registration. It's not. This is where Franklin, in my example, says the state of Wisconsin, we're notifying you that we're selling the residents of Wisconsin and your state a mutual fund.
Mhm.
And would you like some money? Now, I'm not kind of joking, but not really, right? It helps it helps that we took power away, but then offered them a check, right? So we'll give you some money. So you're still going to pay a fee perhaps, but don't tell me that's registration. It is not. Now, this one is interesting. We have exempt transactions, safe harbors, and one of those is called Reg D. And so, if I'm doing a private placement of securities under Reg D, I'm not going to have to register that under 33, and it's federally covered on the Uniform Securities Act, so I'm not going to have to register that. I raise money, a lot of private placement. One of the private placements I did was raising money for this winery in Napa,
Mhm.
and we used Reg D. So I'm selling this to accredited investors, and I didn't register with the SEC. They said, well, Dean, what safe harbor are you using? I said, Reg D. I didn't register with the state of California. They said, why didn't you register with us? I say it's federally covered. Neener, neener, neener. Don't suggest you say that. Okay, so this is testable. These are what we call federally covered securities. Federally covered securities. When you get to unit 10, then you'll get that other bucket. Now be careful here. Looks very similar, but now we're talking about exempt securities under 33. As I said, would I like you to know everything? The answer is yes. But if you can't know everything, then I would want you to know, whatever you can here, right? So we did talk about certain issuers. So this is common again. Municipalities, U.S. government. We talked about banks. We talked about insurance companies. We talked about PUCs, public utility companies. We talked about charitable, religious, and nonprofits. Now be careful. Be careful. Please note, as you see there, the Bear Republic flag. So, Michelle, one of my deals I always use in my lectures and one of my favorite deals was called Del Taco Restaurant Properties. And what we would do is we'd go out and raise $8 to $12 million, buy all cash real estate, and build Del Tacos. We did Del Taco Restaurant Properties 1, Del Taco Restaurant Properties 2, and the SEC says, Dean, did you sell brand new securities to the public without making a registration statement? Did you sell unregistered securities? I say yes. They say, Dean, what safe harbor did you avail yourself of? I say, I availed myself of Rule 147. I made an intrastate offering of securities. I did not sell this outside of the state of California. Whatever state we're talking about here, we're using California. And then, very testable, there's going to be rules about this safe harbor or this exemption. It has to take place within the state. That's a test question. I can only sell it to residents of that state. And the issuer has to have 80% of their business and assets within the state. Now, this is pretty tricky, and here's why this is tricky. I'm not exempt under the Uniform Securities Act. Right, so that's one that is exempt under 33, but not the Uniform Securities Act. So I am going to have to register Del Taco restaurant properties through what's called qualification with the state administrator. I'm going to say, hey, I want to sell Del Taco restaurant properties to residents of California. What do I need to do to qualify this deal with you, state administrator, to sell it to your residents? And whatever he tells me, or he says, she tells me, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Now, it could be a man, before Kamala Harris was a senator and before she was vice president, she was the state administrator for California.
Oh, wow. So
And
it's typically one person who's the administrator?
yeah, it's usually the attorney general. So you probably know the state administrator. She's very popular right now, Letitia James.
Mm-hmm.
So the state administrator is part of the attorney general's office of the state. Not testable, but and boy, Letitia James, Kamala, they got most of them are attorneys. And they could make a lot more in private practice. But what they don't make in private practice, what do they get instead? Power. Lots of power. Right? I kind of, as a voyeur, I think it's kind of funny because, Letitia was poking Trump, like saying, I can look at 40 Wall Street right from my office, saying that she's going to go take it from him, which I think is kind of, by the way, even New York has, every state has its own rules. You can ingest on the template. But New York's rules are even really more stringent about selling securities. And, you do something wrong in New York, they're going to come after you big time. I'm kind of teasing, but not really. Whether it's, Vice President Harris or Letitia James, most of these state administrators are looking for another office after being the state administrator, right? So, this is how you make your bones, right? You go get somebody. All right, so exempt transactions. So exempt transactions. So this is how it's being sold, right? This is a verb. So how am I selling it? So I told the SEC that I availed myself of a safe harbor under 33 called a Rule 147. Now we're talking about what is the safe harbor for transactions under both the Uniform Securities Act and 33. Now, as I said, Michelle, I want you to know it all. But if you can't know it all, where should we put our focus on? 33 or the Uniform Securities Act?
The Uniform Securities Act.
Absolutely, right? Because the state administrator is the one making you take the damn test. It ain't the SEC.
Yep.
It's the North American Securities Administrator Association. All right, so pre-organization certificates. You always think about the life you didn't live. Well, maybe you don't. I do sometimes. And sometimes I read stories. I go, man, I went to the wrong college. I went to Arizona State University. I'm a Sun Devil. And I'll read these stories about deals that are made on the Stanford campus and go, man, I should have gone to Stanford. Not because of the education, because of the people you meet. Man, anyways, Larry and Sergey were in the Gates Technical Center at Stanford working on their algorithm called Google. And you went to their college professor and said, Stanford professor, and said, we think that this algorithm thing called Google, we think it has some commercial applications. And we're thinking that we should take this off campus and get some servers and pursue some commercial opportunities. And the college professor said, well, boys, you've come to the right place. Besides being a professor, I'm also in the venture capital business. And trust me, money is going to be no problem. Right now, though, boys, even if I wrote you a check, you don't have anything called Google Inc. to even cash the check. There is no business entity yet. And Larry and Sergey, well, yeah, where are you going with this? I said, well, listen, boys, here's what I want you to do. I want you to give me physical evidence that I'm investor number 3 in Google Inc. Doesn't exist yet, but when it does, you're 1, you're 2, and I'm 3. Now I'm going to send you to my law firm, and what you need, boys, is a C corp. So you need to get articles of incorporation. Don't worry about it. I got a law firm I work with all the time, Wilson Shoshone, and you go down there, and the attorney meets them in the conference room and says, "Hey guys, before we get started, I just want you to acknowledge I'm investor number 4. No problem with the money. I'm going to do all the legal work for you. Hey, P.S. If we want some more subscribers, I can just walk down the hall if you'd like, and I'll find the rest of these people we need." So the test question is, in a pre-organization certificate, the maximum number of subscribers is 10. Right? So far I've got 1 and 2, right? I got investor number 3, investor number 4, but those are actually 2 subscribers, right? Larry and Sergey. Well, maybe they are subscribers. I don't know, but you get the general idea here. Now, exempt transactions. Again, the state administrator doesn't care about transactions between institutions and broker dealers. Remember, the key thing that's missing here is there's no retail investors involved, right? So as long as there's no retail investors, then, the state administrator says, who cares? Now, be careful about this. What I mean about being careful about this is we have a definition of a accredited investor, and that doesn't mean anything under the Uniform Securities Act. Nothing, nada. All that means under 33 is you can invest in a private placement. So we need to make sure we understand that a doctor with a $10 million net worth is a retail investor in his state entitled to the protections of the Uniform Securities Act. So that accredited investor does not mean that you're not a retail client. You are. So if you're an attorney or you're a car dealer or a doctor, these are people that you typically have net worths of more than $1 million. All that means is that they can participate in a private placement, period. Full stop. Doesn't mean anything other than that. They are entitled to the protections of the Uniform Securities Act. Non-issuer transactions. So again, testable. TD Ameritrade is merging with Schwab, and I think a lot of TD Ameritrade customers are not going to be very happy because the house requirements at TD Ameritrade are much looser than Schwab. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be Schwab's house rules. And one of the things that TD Ameritrade allows people to do is on an unsolicited basis, buy and sell penny stocks. And a lot of broker dealers just say, we don't want any part of that. We don't let you do that here. It's like Vanguard won't let their customers buy cryptocurrency ETFs. And if you tell Vanguard, well, no, I'm going to Fidelity, Vanguard says, well, knock yourself out. I'm joking. I'm sure they have another tactful way to say that, but anyways, non-issuer transactions are exempt. So in my example, TD Ameritrade is not subject to the jurisdiction of the Uniform Securities Act if customers there are buying and selling securities on an unsolicited basis that end up not being registered. That's on the customer. That's not on the broker dealer. Now be careful. Boy, I got to tell you this, Michelle, particularly these NASA exams are giant reading tests. RTFQ, and you got to be real careful. I can't tell you how many times people will miss a question because there's no circumstance in which you, the agent of the broker dealer, are registered. So sometimes people are, they'll be upset and they'll send me this screenshot. How did I miss this? And I said, well, they're not asking you about the transaction or the security. They're asking about the agent of the broker dealer. The person at TD Ameritrade who's answering the phone there's no circumstance in which that person isn't registered, right? And we're not, they get the confusion of the participants. I kind of think of this as like a play and there's a cast of characters. And when you go to a play, they give you the playbill and it kind of tells you who the cast of characters are so you can kind of follow along. And every once in a while I'm gonna look, who's that guy again? Oh, okay, maybe act 2, I don't need my playbill anymore, and I kind of can figure it out. So I kind of think of that as the 66, these participants. You have issuers, you have state administrators, you have broker dealers, you have investment advisors, you got agents, you have investment advisor reps. These are the cast of characters that you're getting tested on. So fiduciaries. Be careful. Fiduciary can change based on context. So we're not talking about a fiduciary in a trust account. No. We're talking about officers of the court carrying out their legal duties. Sad. But this matriarch has passed on, and her son is the executor of her estate, and his trying to make heads and tails of all this stuff that his mom had. And you've really, when people die, lots of people, dead people. I always say on all these tests, see lots of dead persons because there's a question about what's going on. Anyways, I thought it was really, I think, less tactful that her son John remarried, and from that marriage he had a daughter, and then he adopted his wife's 3 other kids. And when his mom died, she gave the daughter that he had with her way more money than he gave the kids from the other. She gave them money too, and then they were complaining about why that daughter got more money. I thought, I think you should say thank you very much. She didn't have to do anything for you. But when he's liquidating those securities, he doesn't need to worry about running afoul of the Uniform Securities Act. So the word for this is authority jurisdiction. So the Uniform Securities Act, the state administrator does not have any jurisdiction or authority over transactions made by an executor of an estate, because they're fiduciaries under law, not fiduciaries in trust accounts. We're talking about fiduciaries in these circumstances. The administrator, if I'm the administrator of the state and I shut down a broker dealer, for example, and their securities, and I'm going to liquidate those securities, I don't need to worry about running afoul of the Uniform Securities Act. If I'm a
Mhm.
trustee, be careful, not in a trust account, a trustee in bankruptcy. So I've been accorded by the court as a trustee in Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And I'm now liquidating securities. I don't have to worry about running afoul of this. I'm a sheriff in asset forfeiture. You're a drug dealer, and I'm going to now sell your securities to buy my police department some Humvees or whatever. I don't need to worry about running afoul of the Uniform Securities Act. Now, be careful. I told you, we're not talking about custodians in an UPMA account. We're not talking about trustees and trust accounts. No, we're talking about here trustees in bankruptcy. We're talking about fiduciaries in these certain legal situations. Exempt transactions. So on the state level, a private placement is much different than it is on the federal level. Now, on the state level, please note, it's not 10 offers accepted, it's 10 offers.
Mhm.
So, I say, hey, Michelle, would you like to participate in this private placement? And you say no. I go, damn you. I'm joking, but you just took up one of my spots, right? Now I got 9 left, right? Now, on the federal level, maybe this is still familiar from your Series 7.
Uh-huh.
Or we have this thing called
506B.
506B. And here I can have 35 non-accredited investors. And remember, I cannot solicit or advertise.
Mhm.
We said the state administrator doesn't care about transactions between issuers and underwriters.
Mhm.
If I'm an underwriter and you're an issuer, so I'll give you an example, Snap. When Snapchat went public, Morgan Stanley was the underwriter, and Morgan Stanley said, listen, where is your corporate headquarters? And Snap said, well, we don't have a corporate campus. What we've done instead is that we bought all these houses in Venice Beach, and we're having all our teams, they work in these houses on the beach. And Morgan Stanley said, well, listen, that's, may be appropriate for a privately held business, but, we can't take you public and we have like 20 houses in Venice on the balance sheet. We're going to need to reverse that. So
Mhm.
Morgan Stanley is going to take those houses off the balance sheet, put the cash on the balance sheet, and we'll work on selling the houses in Venice, and you go work on getting a lease on an office building. Again, the state administrator doesn't care about any of those kind of transactions because there's no retail customers involved.
That's
Now,
so interesting. I didn't know that that's why they sold. It's so funny because my client is the owner of the property that they were in.
oh,
And
really? Well, there you go. There you go.
I didn't know why they had to move, and now it all makes sense.
Yeah, we got to clean up. A lot of times it'll be like, okay, like it's a private company, like a Kohler is a private company. They make bathroom fixtures in Wisconsin. I don't know anything about this. I'm making this up. But let's say the Kohler family has like 20 corporate jets. And then,
Mhm.
we say, listen, if we take you public, I mean, it's going to be, I don't know how many jets is too many, but, maybe a corporate jet. If you're privately held, the accounting is completely different. I mean, than it
Mhm.
would be if you're a public company. When you become public, I joke, for example,
Mhm.
the closing dinner, the dinner before we go public the night before is the best dinner we're ever going to have because that's the last time our expenses aren't going to be public information. So,
Right.
what we spend on dinner is nobody's business but ours. Once we're public,
Mhm.
so
It's all fair.
sometimes we have problems with companies don't want to go public. It might be more, more than it's worth, right? And then when you talk about 506C on the federal level, again, I want you to know
Mhm.
everything, but again, more important to know the NASA version of this. Okay, so assuming we are not an exempt security, assuming we're not an exempt transaction. So how are we going to register? Now, I would recommend to you, and our time together is a buffet. You
Take
know,
what you like.
that's right. Leave what you know. I think you'd be doing yourself a great service if every time you hear the word non-exempt securities, you just translate that
Corporate.
as corporate securities.
Yeah.
What we're meaning, what we're trying to say here is this doesn't go into that basket, of what we talked about. For example, my Del Taco restaurant properties isn't an exempt issuer. It's not the US government. It's not a municipality. It's
Mhm.
not a charity. It's not commercial paper. It's not insurance. It's not a bank. So it doesn't go in that basket. It's not
Mhm.
less than 10 people, 10
Mhm.
subscribers or 10 offers. So the flow chart is, okay, it's not exempt security, non-exempt transaction. Well, then that means we're going to have to register. And so how do we register a security if the security is not exempt or the transaction is not exempt? Now, on the federal level, what we do is we file a registration statement. And you're probably familiar, hopefully still from your 7 on this thing, where we enter into the cooling off period, which is minimum of 20 days. We have a preliminary prospectus, also known as a red herring. That's
Mhm.
pretty much everything you need except the final offering price. We can publish a tombstone. Very testable. The indications of interest are non-binding.
Mhm.
And what we can't do during the cooling off period, right? We can't offer the securities for sale. We can't distribute the final prospectus, except post-dated checks, can't take orders. Now, at the same time that we're going through registration of the security with the SEC, registered securities receivers have gone through this. We are going to test question coordinate with the state administrator. So the way we register a security that we're doing through the SEC is coordination. So coordination test question is used when we're registering in more than one area, right? We're registering with both the SEC and state or states. Okay, so now registering non-exempt securities, corporate securities on the Uniform Securities Act. Identify the methods of state registration. There's 2. There's coordination and there's qualification. Coordination and qualification, right? So if CLC common stock is listed on NASDAQ or New York, it's a federally covered security, meaning
Mhm.
we don't have to register it through coordination or qualification, kind of like a flow chart, right? If it's non-exempt, there's my Del Taco restaurant properties, right? It's
Mhm.
non-exempt. It's not a federally covered security. It's not a muni. It's not a government. Then we're going to have to register through either coordination or qualification. Those are 2 ways to register the security, right? Because that's the default should be we shouldn't be selling unregistered securities.
Mhm.
So notice filing, we said, is not a method of registration, but this is primarily used with mutual funds where they just notify the state of Wisconsin that they plan on selling it. So I told you coordination test question is a public offering at the state level and with the SEC. That would be a traditional IPO, if you will.
Mhm.
And remember, I told you my Del Taco, I can't do that because I didn't register with the SEC because I'm
Right.
using 147. So
One.
yeah,
Right.
if I'm going to do that, then it's going to be qualification.
Mhm.
Coordination is how do we coordinate with the state administrator? Here recently, Michelle, I moderate some subreddits on Reddit, and they were sent me a offer to buy securities on Reddit pre-IPO. Wow. Now they made me damn sure that they've registered that security in Nevada because that's where I'm coming from, and they're soliciting me for that transaction. So they have to coordinate. And the way they're going to coordinate that Reddit IPO with the state of Nevada, by the way, if they don't coordinate in the state of Nevada, they better not send me that offer, right? Because, they're making an offer to residents of Nevada, got to be careful here. So the way they coordinate is they're going to send the state administrator a copy of the latest prospectus, copies of all the documents they filed with the SEC, a specimen of the mock-up of the stock certificate, and articles of incorporation, and the underwriting agreement between Reddit and, in this case, Morgan Stanley. The effective date is simultaneous. Be careful. There's a lot of important words. Please note that doesn't say approve. There's 2 nasty words we never use. We never say securities are approved, and we never use the word guarantee.
Guaranteed. Yep.
And I mean, on the front page of every offering document, in big all cap letters, it says the SEC and or state administrator neither approve nor disapproves of any securities offering. They neither pass upon the adequacy or the accuracy of the information contained herein. Any claim to the contrary is a criminal offense. Wow.
Mhm.
I mean, that means go to jail, right? So you're either
Mhm.
going to go to federal prison if it's 33 or state prison if it's the Uniform Securities Act. So effective date, no stop order proceeding. The registration has been on file for a minimum time period. Now, as we said, we can't use coordination if we're not going through that registration with the SEC. And so the only thing that's going to be left for us to use would be qualification. There's my Del Taco, right? It's used for intrastate offerings. Any security is eligible. And again, now I say to the state administrator, how do I qualify Del Taco restaurant properties to sell to residents of your state? And whatever they ask me for, I say yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, right? So they say, Dean, we'd like some relevant information about Del Taco restaurant properties. We'd like to know kind of what you're up to. We said we're building all cash, we're buying all cash real estate, building Del Tacos. It's a Mexican-American fast food chain. And the investors are going to get 12% of the gross food sales. So, we do $1 million, we're going to give $120,000 to the partners. So any security is eligible. And that's how we're going to do what we call qualification. Now, be careful. This is the one registration. This is the one registration that does not December 31st. So I say, I call my state administrator. I say, hey, what's going on? March 30th. I know it's Sunday, it's Easter, but I'm surprised I found you in the office. I'm just wondering if Del Taco restaurant properties is effective. And he goes, Dean, yeah, I'm sorry we didn't get back to you. It was actually effective Friday, March 28th. So I now task question to have a year to run around trying to sell Del Taco restaurant properties. So my registration on my Del Taco restaurant properties is good for a year. So this March 28th was Friday till March 28th of 2025. Now in March 2025, all the other ones, by the way, are December 31st. So, your mind is the only one that ain't December 31st. At the end of the year, I tell the state administrator, I said, well, I told you I wanted to raise 8 to 12 and I'm at 10. I'm wondering if I can go ahead and extend the offering. And he said, do you plan on changing any of the terms? I better say no. No, I'm going to leave the terms as they are. Well, Dean, I'll tell you what, well, yeah, you can extend it, but keep me posted every quarter. I want to make sure the deal doesn't go stale, that, you're still active in the marketplace. So I say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, whatever they want me to do, right? That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
In case you're not clear what fraud is, willful attempt to deceive for profit or gain, right? It's not limited to judicial case law. It's statutory definition. So, if you end up in jail, it's usually for making a fraudulent distribution of securities to the public. Now, be careful again. We're not saying you can rip off people with insurance. We're just saying that's a different regulator, right? So Uniform Securities Act doesn't apply to the sale of insurance. That's what non-securities products are called on the test, right? So any act, practice, or course of business that acts as a fraud or deceit, make untrue statements. Material facts are very important. There's some key words, and material fact is one of those key words. I saw this broker being interviewed and they asked him why he didn't tell this little lady the information. He said, I thought I would lose the sale. I can't think of a worse answer than that. I mean, because that's what a material fact is. It's the kind of fact that might alter an investor's decision. So I say, listen, this might alter your investment decision, but something you ought to know. Now, I'm not trying to stay out of trouble, and this can actually be a test question, is that the state administrator said, Dean, you didn't disclose that information to Michelle. I said, well, I didn't, disclose it to her because I thought it was immaterial. So, I mean, it doesn't mean I can't omit facts. I can. I just can't omit material facts. Now it becomes debatable what's material. It's kind of a subjective thing, but but by the way, that broker blew it. I thought I'd lose a sale, meaning it was most definitely material information, right?
Yeah.
Any device, scheme, or artifice. Don't you love that word? Artifice. I just think that's such a cool word. I do it. It's the weird words on this thing, but mom was shopping for a car and she called me on Friday. I was out of town. And she told me that the car dealer told her she doesn't buy the car today, Friday. because she said, hey, I want to wait till my son gets back in town so I can, take him, show him the car. And so I'm thinking Monday, I'd make the decision. And when she called me, I said, Mom, I hate to say this, but I don't think there's a code of conduct or unethical business practices for a car dealer. I think that's an artifice. I think it's an artificial sense of urgency that doesn't really exist. I think they're
Mhm.
just using that to close you. Listen, why don't you just tell him you talk to your son, and that's fine. If that's not available, that offer on Monday, we'll just find another dealer in Vegas who would honor
Mhm.
that deal. And then, she called me, oh, they said they'd wait till Monday. I go, oh, okay, well, prove it was an artifice. The big ones here are like artificial sense of urgency and selling dividends. I say, hey, Michelle, if you don't buy the stock today, man, you don't get the dividend. You heard of dividend capture programs, right? Those are
Yeah.
artifices. Now, I would tell you that on your 66, two big, huge areas on the test are disclosures and unethical business practices. That's 25 questions. So, don't lie, cheat or steal. So this slide here is going to be unit 14. The
Mhm.
entire unit 14 is this stuff, and it's very testable. And the test is so negative. I mean, it's really
And
negative because they don't test you on doing the right thing. On this test, you got to believe like my dad, my dad's a big time missionary guy. You got to believe in human depravity and original sin. If we didn't have rules, people would be, running amok and taking advantage of people. Well, it's unfortunate, but there's no stories about good brokers. I always joke when I see a 60 Minutes profile and they teasing it, it's going to be an investment person. I go, oh God, this is not
here we
going to
go.
be a person who did the right thing and built the community. It's going to be somebody who raped and pillaged the whole place, right? All right. Well, that's today's thing. 88 came in pretty good at an hour. So
Thank you. Yeah, I
when's your
apologize.
test
I
date?
was
Is
a
that in
little
your
late.
notes?
It's on the 6th of May.
Oh, we got plenty of time. Oh my God. So you're still working. And
Oh,
as I recall, you're not a full-time studier. You're
right.
doing your
Yeah.
doing your other things, right?
Doing my work and then
Okay.
I'm in
All right.
school
When
for
we
my
get
master's.
closer, right? So we'll time it. But if you're going to May, we probably 7, 10 days out want to start doing some practice exam, just kind of see where you're at in terms of
So
what's going on.
I would love to book a session with you on the Thursday or Friday before my test date. I think it's a day that's not available on your calendar, but I can
Let
book.
me just check right now for you.
Okay.
Um,
So either the second or the third.
yeah, sometimes I don't. If you're already in the queue, are you still there? I think I accidentally hit the. Oh,
Yeah,
there
I'm here.
you're still here. Um, when I'm off grid, I don't allow people to book, but if you're already in the system, then that's where there's some time. So let me just check. I'm sending
Okay.
mom to Europe, so I do have to take her to LA to the airport, but I'm not sure when that is. I'm bringing up my
Oh,
calendar.
yeah. Sounds good.
Um,
And we have another one on the 13th of
okay, so
April.
what date are you asking about?
Second or third of May.
April?
May.
May. Oh, boy, it's way out there.
Yeah, because I have
Oh, I
I
just
have
think that's just not allowing you to book because it's too far out. If you want, let's just make go to May. Yeah, it's not letting you do because I don't let people book that far in advance. But what did you want in April or May? You want May?
um, second or third,
You
Thursday
can have
or
whatever you want on May 2nd or 3rd.
Mhm.
You can book it now and I can move it there.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah,
it's really
let's do noon. Would that be okay?
Yeah,
For two
yeah. So let me
hours?
just write it down. So you're just going to book it, and then once you book it, just book it anywhere, and then I'm
Okay.
going to move it to May. As soon as I see it book, I'll move May 2nd. What time do you want May 2nd?
May 2nd, noon for 2 hours.
Noon. I love it. Noon. Now, are you planning on doing a practice shared screen final with me, or are you
Yeah.
just got 2 hours worth of stuff?
Yeah, I think so our next one is on the 13th of April and I
Okay,
I
so
would
May
like to
2nd. I'm gonna put that 2 hours. That might run. Just plan on taking a little more than 2 hours because sometimes it runs over. So
Oh, okay.
I'll make sure
Well,
there's
I
nobody.
mean, we could time it to make it 2 hours. That's no problem.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to finish it. We don't want to get like leave 20 questions and not be able to score it.
Oh,
Okay, so that's May 2nd at noon, 2 hours. I'm gonna move it when I see it. I'm gonna move it. Where other did you want?
I think that'll be good because I
Okay,
have
so yeah.
yeah, I
Well,
have a
I'll
lot
make
of
sure
good.
we can find you some time if you need more. So just go
Okay.
ahead and book the two, and then as soon as I get the ding, I'll move it to May 2nd, noontime Pacific, right?
Noontime Pacific. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. And then remember, if you need me before now, your next session, just reach out. You don't need a book tutor if you just got a quick question or you got an email. Oh, you could be my guinea pig. I try to make it easier for people. I just get inundated with so many people who are, you know, ex have high expectations of free versus people who have paid for tutoring. So I'm trying to kind of
Uh-huh.
sort them. So my
Good.
new email for people who are doing tutoring
Mhm.
is dean@guruexamprep.com.
Okay.
So if
Dean.
you, you know, if you need me, just send me an email. You can be a guinea pig. If for some reason I don't answer because I haven't got my back office squared away that I think I do. Do you have my other email, deantinney@gmail.com?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you got both of them, but you know, we'll see if that as clever as I think I am in terms of trying to build a back office.
Great.
Okay, anything else for me today?
Thank you so much, Dean. Always a
My
pleasure.
pleasure. I enjoy our time together. I like it. I think they're doing the right thing, chunking it out. As I
Yeah.
always say, inch by inch, 66 cents,
Inch,
yard
yard
by
by yard.
yard. It's
Yeah.
hard. So I'll see you for the
Exactly.
next session, if not sooner.
Thank you. Happy
Okay.
Easter.
Okay.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye-bye.